It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode is brought to you by HP. Whenever you do your best thinking, the HP Spectre X360 is ready when inspiration strikes. With power save for battery life and focus mode to multitask, you can do your best thinking whenever and wherever it happens. The HP Spectre X360 2-in-1 convertible PC with Windows 10 saves battery life for whenever an idea hits you. HP Spectre X360, a more thoughtful laptop.
Backs him down. Giannis into the lane. Giannis spinning. Fading shot. Up. Good for Giannis at the buzzer. Bucks win it.
Our town, Green State, our time, our year, whole world's on watch because they think of it. Our town, Green State, our time, our year, whole world's on watch because they think of it.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman, here alongside the founder of BrewHoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden. We've got some news today. The schedule dropped, well, parts of the schedule, some marquee matchups anyway, we are at least aware of. So we're definitely going to get to those a little bit later. And then we also have a Brooke Lopez question from the mailbag. We're going to continue to work through these questions. We know we've had some good ones. Of course, you can get me on Twitter at Kane Pittman or the email lockedonbucks@gmail.com. We're going to work through them. We've obviously got a few weeks here of the off season, of a shortened off season to get through. So we'll get to the schedule in just a little bit, Frank. But I did want to mention, I got a message, I got a DM in the last hour that we're recording this, and it was from a listener. And I won't say who it was because I don't know whether they would want me to even do this. But it was a note just saying that this listener's father passed away yesterday, and it was just a note saying, really enjoy the show. I listen every day. My father used to listen every day as well. And thank you for doing the show. So I wanted to say, firstly, to this listener that may or may not hear this, that hopefully they're taking care. Hopefully their family are doing okay as well. I really appreciated the note. And Frank, it's a reminder. I mean, I do this podcast. This helps me distract myself from other things. I know you really enjoy doing it, but the listeners are the same thing. That's why I listen to some of the other podcasts as well. And it's especially at the moment when there's a lot of shit going on. It's a reminder, man. People like listening to the show. We love doing the show, and it's nice. It's nice when you hear people say that it's helped them with certain things.
Yeah, and I mean, I think most people listen regularly know. I went to the Game 6 closeout game with my dad, and that was a really big part about why I think the Bucks winning a championship was so meaningful, just because of the fact that was just something we literally bonded over the course of 30 years. And whether it's with a parent, with a sibling, grandparent, family friend, whatever it might be, right? I think that's how kind of sports can be really special and transformative beyond, just kind of the way that, people justifiably say, oh, it's just cheering for laundry, right? Or cheering for millionaires, et cetera. And that is absolutely correct. But I think, one of the beautiful things about it is how, we each in our own ways sort of bring meaning to it through very real relationships. And so definitely thinking about, the person that you mentioned. And I had a similar conversation with someone else after I tweeted out the picture of my dad and I at Game 6. And, my dad's 81 years old. He's still really active, but, he's had some issues with balance recently. And so I can't remember if we talked about it on the pod, but he was kind of literally a game time decision as to whether or not he was actually going to go. And, he is, especially in the upper deck of Fiserv, so the stairwells can be a little steep. It's not really great. I mean, the huge crowds, everything like that, it's really not great if you have some balance issues. But it's just one of those things we just said we got to make it work. And he was obviously very, very thankful that he was able to, that he made the trip. And I I talked to somebody else who saw it, and their father passed away this spring, and kind of had a similar story about sort of the relationship they had, and how the Bucks and basketball were an important part of that, that kind of the bond, and it kind of was woven into the fabric of kind of what they did, talking about the Bucks, watching games, things like that. So yeah, I mean, I didn't expect this to take kind of a heavy direction, but again, it's just if we can ever provide any type of a distraction from those things, or a means of making people feel a little bit more connected with the people around you, that's obviously the best possible thing we can do. So yeah, love you guys. Appreciate these kinds of notes. That's what kind of keeps us going.
Absolutely. And I guess the main point for everyone, just take care out there at the moment. Like I said, there is a lot going on. And I did sort of throw that at you, Frank. That message just came through, and I thought I really wanted to mention it. But the thing we were going to start this podcast with, and I guess what we'll roll into now, is the schedule. Now, I brought this up with Justin a couple of days ago, and he said, look, I believe the schedule is coming here in the next couple of days. We have seen it come through. And we'll start with the big one, the ring ceremony. The Bucks are going to be playing the Nets at Fiserv Forum, which is going to be one hell of a game, first of all. But obviously, for very obvious reasons, with the banner and the rings, it's going to be an incredible experience for all Bucks fans that are able to get there. So the home opener, October 19, it's on TNT, 6:30 p.m. Bucks and Nets. Doesn't get much better than that, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can remember back to one of the games when the Heat, I think it was during after one of the 2 Heat championships with LeBron, and I think they played the Bulls in their ring ceremony game. Yeah, and they just got wiped by 30 plus points, and after that I was kind of like, man, how can they get wiped like that, like on a night when they should be all fired up about their the trophy and all that stuff and the banner raising, and I think it's a surprisingly familiar thing to have happen. That I don't know what it is. I don't know what the psychology is, but the letdown of having to play a game after you get the payoff of the previous season's championship with the banner going up and the rings and all that. It doesn't seem to be an uncommon thing to happen. So hopefully the Bucks can avoid that, because on the one hand, whatever, the regular season has never meant less to probably Bucks fans than, well, I shouldn't say that. I think I'm getting out of myself. I immediately thought back to, the 15-win season in 2013. And okay, that regular season did mean less. But in the grand scheme of, good Bucks teams and how much we're sort of getting wrapped up in the regular season, I'm sure Bucks fans will we'll all still get wrapped up in the night to night wins and losses, but certainly relative to previous seasons, I'd say there will be less stress about it. But that said, I think if there's any game that you want to win this season, it's going to be games against the Nets, not only because they are the presumptive favorites in Vegas and elsewhere for the next NBA championship, but because of the obvious narrative, the obvious storyline about the Bucks having beaten them in 7 games, but you didn't play them at their, when they're at their strongest. So, if they had been healthy, they would have won. So, not that, we don't really talk much about asterisks. I mean, there is no such thing as asterisks on NBA titles in the record books. It's not like that's really a thing. It's really just kind of a thing we talk about because, morning sports talk shows need something to talk about. But of course, I think the Nets are the one opponent that you would really like to beat, especially on opening night, just because it would be a cool statement to make. Cosmically not very important, it's not going to really mean anything come playoff time when the actual games that matter are going to happen. But I think as far as, early season games go, that one will have some meaning just because of the symbolism behind it. And because, it would be great to beat the Nets at full strength. And again, maybe I'm being presumptive saying that the Nets will be at full strength, because who knows? Lots of time for James Harden to, pull a hamstring or, whatever else, whatever other injuries you can incur in a strip club or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. But yeah, that's a game that I think is a little bit different than pretty much any other early season game. Because not only is it ring night, banner raising night, it's also a chance to make a little bit of a statement for the talking heads and for yourselves, maybe a little bit that just because the Nets are healthier than they were last spring, that you're the champs. So yeah, I think it has some meaning. If we're gonna put any value into the regular season at all, it might as well be that game.
All right, let's get back to talking about our great friends over at Sweatblock, and in particular, we are discussing the Sweatblock wipes, which you've heard me talk about over the last couple of days if you listen to the show. But the Sweatblock wipes are doctor created and doctor recommended. They work for up to 7 days per use, and there is a dry shirt guarantee. If Sweatblock doesn't keep you dry, you can get your money back, because we know there are a few things in life that aren't fun to talk about, and one of them is excessive sweating. You know, when you are sweating through your shirts for no reason, it's embarrassing, right? So we've all been there before, and with Sweatblock, it's stronger and more effective than most clinical antiperspirants. You simply apply it at night before bedtime, go to bed. The next morning you wake up, wash, and go about your day without worrying about sweat. Guaranteed. So you can get involved. You can get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with the promo code LOCKEDON, or at Amazon and CVS. And then we can talk about Theragun. Don't let the stress of daily life weigh on your body, whether you're an elite athlete or someone like me just trying to make it through the day tension-free. Theragun can help. Theragun is a handheld percussive therapy device that releases your deepest muscle tension using a scientifically calibrated combo of depth, speed, and power. It's as quiet as an electric toothbrush, whether you want to treat your muscle tension from working out, an injury, or just the stresses of everyday life. There's no substitute for the Theragun Gen 4. Try Theragun for 30 days, starting at only $199. Go to therabody.com/locked-on right now and get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's Therabody. That's THERABODY.com/locked-on. Therabody.com/locked-on. It's not lost on me that, and I saw multiple people mentioning this on Twitter, that James Harden, I mean, I don't know if he's even going to fly to Milwaukee, or it might be too much for him to bear to watch Giannis get a ring and have the banner lifted. So I think that's pretty cool that James Harden's going to have to live through that. I'll certainly enjoy that. And also, Thanasis being there, I just wonder how crazy he's going to go. I mean, he missed out on Game 6. He might just go absolutely mental during this ceremony. But you're right. I think it's a night that for most fans, it's not going to matter whether they win or lose in terms of ruining the experience of seeing the banner go up. But it would be the nice little icing on the cake if they could pick up a win, particularly against a team that, as you pointed to, a lot of people are favoring to go through to the finals and potentially win a championship. Obviously, there's a little bit of a rivalry that's going to continue there from what we saw in the postseason last year. And altogether, really, the games that these teams played during the regular season were just highly, highly entertaining. So I would expect a pretty good game that we're going to see as well. So it's going to be fun. The other piece of the puzzle, and there's a few other dates that we'll go through, but the other piece of the puzzle is Bucks and Celtics on Christmas Day at Fiserv Forum, which I personally think is awesome. I mean, I didn't think there was any doubt the Bucks were going to get a Christmas Day game, but last year they had the Warriors at Fiserv, first Christmas game in whatever it was, 48 years, however long it had been, but there was no fans. So this is also pretty cool. Again, a bit of a rivalry team, even though the Celtics obviously dropped off last year, but they've had playoff series matches matched up together a number of times, generally pretty close games. And this time the fans will be able to be there.
Man, how long ago does that Warriors game feel? Like that feels like, I mean, I don't know. Last Christmas doesn't feel that long ago, but that game feels like it was, 3 years ago. That feels like an eternity ago. And remember James Wiseman looked really good in that game, and Giannis really struggled, and the Bucks hit a bunch of threes, and it really wasn't competitive. And as you said, it was just weird because due to the bubble and the shortened off season and everything, we started on Christmas, so it was very, very weird in that sense. Whereas this year, obviously, we'll have had basically a couple months of NBA basketball to kind of get ready for the Christmas Day game. And I'll say this: I know there was some commentary about, feeling like, oh, they should have given us Bucks Suns on Christmas Day, as a rematch of the finals. Sure, that would have been cool. I mean, that would have been cooler than Bucks Celtics. But part of me is also like, my general philosophy on Christmas. Let's look back at recent history. Bucks crushed the Knicks. What was it, 3 years ago? Right. Pretty low intensity game because the Knicks sucked. Bucks were very good. They were there. I still like those jerseys they wore that game. Those were like the jerseys they only wore like 3 or 4 times, right? The kind of ones that looked a little bit like the Mecca jerseys, but were a more normal color scheme. That was a fun game, early afternoon game. Took the tension out of Christmas Day. Very enjoyable. Philadelphia game the next year, woof. Probably the worst game they played all year, maybe. And to do it on Christmas, Giannis sucked. Might have been banged up. It was. Hey, the Sixers won their Christmas championship, right? That's the biggest thing that the Sixers have won since '83 or whenever they won the actual NBA title, right? Christmas champions of 2019 or whatever that was. So that sucked. And then last year they get a home game, which is, I'd say really matters, even if no fans were there, just because it's nice to have the players not have to get on a plane in order to get home for Christmas. So my general sentiment is like, if you want to give the Bucks a lesser opponent on Christmas Day, I'm all for it, right? Because look, it's Christmas Day, right? I want to be able to turn on the TV, watch the Bucks win a basketball game, go about the rest of my day with a smile on my face. I don't want to have them play some super high stress game against a great team. Save that for like a Thursday ESPN or Thursday TNT game or something like that in the middle of the season. Christmas, I don't want a loss to kind of put a shadow over Christmas. So I'm a little weird maybe in that regard. I will say this. I think the Celtics should be pretty good this year. I mean, they've made a number of moves. They just extended Marcus Smart, who is always annoying and for some reason can defend Giannis about as well as anybody around right now, which is just super annoying because Marcus Smart is the most aggravating basketball player. But look, I think the Celtics should be pretty good. I mean, they got rid of their bum coach, Brad Stevens, right? Kemba Walker is gone, but they still have Smart. We'll see what Dennis Schroeder can bring with him being brought in the fold. They kind of recycle Evan Fournier into Josh Richardson, and most importantly, Ime Udoka's there to kind of give them a fresh start as a head coach. So I don't know. I mean, I think the Celtics. I never really understood why the Celtics were that bad last year. We'll see, I guess, kind of what they are this year. But certainly, I will hope for a big win because as someone who lived in Boston for 15 years, nothing is more enjoyable than seeing sad Celtics fans. I guess now seeing sad Nets fans would be better. But yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. The Celtics and Bucks at least have like some recent history with, a couple of playoff series going against each other. Boston obviously was disappointing last year, but they should be better than they were. I think they're, I would probably pick them maybe 5th in the East with the possibility of sneaking up a spot or two. So we'll see kind of where everybody is a couple months into the season, but good matchup and whatever, even though it's an afternoon game, whatever. I don't need my Christmas evening to be, Bucks. I'm okay with the early afternoon game. And again, I feel like people always sort of turn these more into like discussions about respect and things like that. And I don't know, whatever. Bucks will have rings on their fingers at that point. So I'm not that stressed.
Yeah. Well, I did joke on Twitter that this was a Christmas gift from the league to Chris Middleton to give him the Boston Celtics on Christmas, which is just, really lovely from the league there. So, of course, we love beating the Celtics. Hopefully the Bucks can play well there. And the last really note I've got on the schedule before we move on to this Brook Lopez conversation is just some other dates that we have. So the Bucks open scrimmage October 3, and then they've got 5 preseason games, which is a little bit too much for me, but they're starting October 5. They're at Memphis, then at Brooklyn, then they're at home against the Thunder, then they travel to Utah, and then they're back home against Dallas. So I don't know. I mean, 5 games for preseason, probably a little bit too much for me, but the main point is that that's October 3. So by my count, and I'm doing this right now off the top of my head, I think that's about 46 days, 45, 46 days, something around that mark until the open scrimmage. Obviously, training camp will be a little bit before that. So it's going to be here. It's going to be here very, very quickly. October 3rd, the open scrimmage. We always enjoy it. We watch it. We whatever, draw whatever we want to from that game. It's going to be a lot of fun, but it's right on our doorstep already. Yeah,
it's funny because the Packers had their scrimmage thing recently, like in the last week, and like when being on Twitter during that, it's like crazy how much analysis all the Packers writers do of like an inter squad scrimmage, like which I assume doesn't even have like tackling or anything. It's kind of funny. I mean, I think definitely, that scrimmage coming at the start of everything definitely makes it, more interesting, because literally we haven't seen any basketball since summer league at that point. I don't think it's particularly interesting for the likes of seeing Giannis and Chris, because I think we kind of know what they're capable of. But as a continuation of the guys that we saw in Vegas and some of the young players in particular, and some of the new faces, I think it'll be interesting just to see guys like kind of Rodney Hood and Shem Ojale, guys that are sort of maybe X factors is kind of overstating it, but guys whose roles there could swing a fair bit. Like those guys could just not play, or they could actually be kind of nightly rotation guys, depending on how things go. So, seeing some of those guys for the first time, and kind of just like what Bud's going to ask of them. And then, of course, seeing more of Mamu and the young guys that we've been watching here in Vegas, that we've been joylessly watching lose in Vegas, will of course also be just something to kind of keep an eye on. So yeah, open scrimmage October 3rd. Let's rock and roll. I don't know. I mean, like, it's just now everything too just has this extra glow, because it's like, the first scrimmage, a chance to welcome back the champions, right? I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a much cooler atmosphere this year relative to previous years, just because of that. And the preseason game, same way, right? Every game, I think hopefully Bucks fans will take as an opportunity to pay their respect and gratitude to last year's team and everything that they were able to give us.
You know what time it is, Frank? It's Built Bar time now, where we are just continuing to celebrate freedom of choice. I love Built Bar, Frank. You know that. And when you talk to a Built Bar fan, they're definitely passionate about their favorites, just like me. My favorite happens to be coconut. Justin Garcia, not so much. Not a big coconut fan, but that's okay, because if you're not, there's plenty of other options for you to run through there. I've mentioned them before, but I'll go through a couple here. Raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel. They are all there. There's 9 delicious flavors. If you don't know which one you want, get a mix box. And they're healthy for you too, which is obviously a pretty key ingredient. If you want a snack, you got to be going with the Built Bar. 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from 130 to 180, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Just go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED for 15% off at built.com. And it's betonline.ag time. It never ends. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action, because that sport is not slowing down. Baseball season is in full swing. The Brewers are on a rampage. It would be helpful if Christian Yelich could get going a little bit. Can we get this guy going? Let's get the MVPs of Wisconsin in their best form heading towards the postseason. So before the next pitch, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore, as this is your chance to get into the game as teams prep for their runs to the playoffs. Head to the website and you'll receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with the promo code Locked On. That's BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, let's jump to this question. It comes from Chase Bellmeyer at CB Michael 7 on Twitter. He says, with Brook Lopez turning 34 in April, do you think the Bucks are looking to find a long-term replacement at center? Perhaps someone who matches up better against Brooklyn? If so, who are some of the options that intrigue you? Now, I'm not sure whether we have any options or you have any options or how you want to approach this, but I just thought it is actually an interesting question. Now, for anyone that listened to this podcast through the regular season, you'll probably realize the most angry I got, I think, was early in the season or halfway through the season when the hashtag trade Brook was going around on Twitter, which still to me is one of the most ridiculous things. You guys still should be ashamed of that if you were tweeting that stuff. I mean, it didn't make sense at the time, and you all got proven wrong. So anyway, whatever. But Brook Lopez, I do think moving forward, it's at least an interesting question to think, okay, well, what are the Bucks going to do, or what's going to be the plan of attack in terms of having this big guy there? Brook's been such a key piece to everything the Bucks have done. And quite honestly, he's been an underutilized resource on offense, which I think is interesting. Maybe that's going to be beneficial for him moving forward. He's got 2 more full years left on that contract before he becomes a free agent. And I remember when he signed it, I mean, this was a discussion that was had. Okay, this is going to take him to 35, 36 years old. What type of player will he be from there? So I wouldn't imagine, I could not possibly imagine that in a championship defense, in a championship defending year, given what he did in the postseason, given how reliable he's been in the playoffs, that there would be any thoughts to moving Brook Lopez this season. But with 2 seasons left on the contract, it's at least interesting, particularly when you do look at the roster and you say, well, okay, Giannis is a big guy. He's going to play some minutes at the 5. There's no doubt about that. But then you really only have Bobby Portis. So, look, I don't think it's a bad question to think what the Bucks should do moving forward. But the one thing I'll say is this Bucks team without Brook Lopez, I mean, that is not some easy shoes to fill.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to look, just looking at his numbers last year. He puts up a 50.3% from the field overall, 34% from 3, 12.3 points, a block and a half in the regular season. Played 70 games, 27 minutes a game. That goes to 29 minutes a game in the playoffs, and averages 13 points a game on 55% shooting from the field, 32% from 3, and again, 1.5 blocks per game. I think the concern was, are you going to be able to is he going to get played off the floor, right? That's always been the perpetual concern with Brook Lopez. But I think when you look back at the playoffs, he certainly had some up and down games against the Suns, right? Like his role kind of ebbed and flowed in the Phoenix series. There were games where he was very important, games where he wasn't.
Struggled in game ones, like much of the Bucks. He had some rough game ones.
Yeah, and I think part of that was like figuring out like kind of tactically what the Bucks were going to do, like switching everything in game 1. I don't know. I mean, I still feel I still feel like there's like I still don't really know that in and of itself really hurt the Bucks all that much. But it was definitely an interesting playoffs in the sense that Game 5 against the Hawks obviously was massive. The way he stepped up, scoring 33 in Giannis's first game without Giannis. And like Game 2, the way he played defensively after that Game 1 against the Hawks was terrific. And I think perhaps most importantly, both for a series that did happen and a series that didn't, he was hugely important against the Nets. And of course, the Nets will play a little bit differently when all 3 of their key guys are healthy. And, again, does James Harden being fully healthy and Kyrie being fully healthy, does that make you want to switch more? Does that make you want to play drop more? I don't know. I'm really curious just to see kind of what the best matchups are going to end up being. Obviously, you don't have PJ Tucker to throw at Durant this year. So I think defensively there's some questions there. But I think the most important thing is that, as he has every postseason, he has shown that he's a guy that steps up and can be relied on. And again, maybe he's not a guy that you can play 30 minutes every night, but I mean, he came up huge in big moments for the Bucks throughout the playoffs, including Game 7 against the Nets. When did he play 45 minutes in that game? Something around that, I think. And the huge block in overtime on Durant, and finishes off with the game sealing free throws to beat the team that he is still the all-time leading scorer of, the Brooklyn Nets. So I would agree. I mean, Bud loves him. Giannis loves him. Giannis loves, I think, playing with Brook. I don't think Giannis has any desire to become a full-time center or something like that, even though he certainly can be a really dangerous weapon deployed that way, as we saw, especially in the finals. But yeah, I mean, I think this year is kind of a rinse and repeat type of year for the Bucks, and they've been very lucky in that Brook has stayed healthy after some early career foot problems. Again, you just sort of knock on wood. His durability has been pretty remarkable, and I think that he was really valuable against the Nets last year. And then if you have to play the Philadelphia 76ers, you obviously don't want to have to play really small against the Sixers, against Joel Embiid. You really like having a guy of Lopez's stature to be able to kind of battle with him down low. So yeah, I mean, I think just the way that certainly the East continues to shape up, in a Heat matchup, I don't think we saw anything to suggest that the Heat can play him off the floor. So I think, and even if you look out West, right? I mean, a team like the Lakers, with how big that they like to play, if they came out of the West, or the Jazz came out of the West, or whatever it might be, or obviously the Suns, we already saw that. It's not like there's some existential crisis that any of those teams really cause you as far as being able to play Brook Lopez. So time will catch up with him, of course, at some point, but he's a really smart, cerebral player. And it's not like he's, relying on his athleticism much as is. So hopefully he'll continue to age well. And I think, we'll have to kind of have this conversation again in a year. At that point he'd be an expiring contract. And I think probably the other big thing is going into next off season, Bobby Portis will opt out of his current cheap contract. And, there may be an understanding that Bobby Portis is going to get a big contract at that point, which could be a little over the full mid-level. So that could be, that would be over $10 million a year at that point. Dante DiVincenzo, Grayson Allen will be free agents if they're on the team at that point. And those guys, especially Dante, I mean, I think you would expect that Dante is healthy and playing back to what we saw last year before the injury, that he would probably also be a guy commanding $10 million plus per year. So, given the tax burden that would imply for the Bucks, are you going to be carrying all these guys on the roster long term? Of course, I would say, the tax should not be the defining factor whether or not you keep Brook Lopez. I certainly hope it would not. But again, I think you don't know, right? Especially if his play drops off. Center is a position where you can oftentimes get by with paying a lot less money and getting decent kind of inning eating type of players, especially if you're ultimately going to rely heavily on Giannis playing center in the playoffs. That center position just becomes probably a little less important. So maybe that's an area that, maybe the Bucks decide that they can, if Brook really declines, or 2 years from now when his contract expires, whatever it might be, maybe go a different direction. But certainly, I agree with you. I think Brook is definitely going to be with the team this year, barring something very unforeseen. And I think the comfort level of how they play with him, I don't think the postseason in any way diminished kind of what their commitment to him should be, or their comfort level kind of keeping him on the roster. So, which is good, because I love Brook Lopez just as a dude. I enjoy having him on the team. So try not to be too sentimental about it, but yeah, I think he's going to be around this season. And I think then you'll have to kind of re-examine it a little bit the following off season. And obviously I would love it if he stays through his contract, and then maybe he just comes back on a lower number as he kind of ages, maybe into a backup role or something like that. But, this is kind of the reality the Bucks are going to be facing, obviously, with a roster that, aside from Giannis, is on the wrong side of 30. And certainly Brook is, probably the most important guy who you would expect to be entering that that part of their careers where you expect a bit of that drop off. But with apologies to George Hill, who, is a little older, but is obviously not a starter.
No, it's a remarkable career to look at. Brook Lopez, just when you look at the overall stats, there's a chance, he's an outside chance to cross 15,000 points this season coming up, which obviously is a huge number. I still believe he's a franchise leading scorer with Brooklyn, which is a funny one there. But he was traded from Brooklyn, he signed with the Lakers, and he was only 28 at that point. Traded, was he? At that point.
Yeah.
So 28 years old. And then from that point on, he is a player that sort of feels like he's older than what he is. But, I mean, he's had 4 straight years, hasn't crossed or really come that close to playing 30 minutes per game. And he's just been getting you 13-5 and a block and a half pretty much on repeat year after year. He's consistent. He's over the course of his career, he's really been managed minutes-wise, going back to those injuries that he had earlier in his career. He's only topped 30 a couple of times in his career. So you never know with these types of players if there's a drop off about to come. But I would agree with you, particularly when it comes to the Embiid factor. The Bucks haven't faced the Sixers yet in a playoff series, but it has to happen at some point, right? And then I think you're going to want Brook Lopez there. So I think it's a good question. I think it's something to keep on watch, particularly moving forward with financial stuff, as Frank pointed to. But for now, I'm not too concerned. I'm just going to continue to bask in the glory of being right when it came to Brook Lopez being a big factor in the playoffs.
Isn't it funny that he was basically just like a matching contract in that, like, there was the D'Angelo Russell trade, right? That took Russell to Brooklyn, and
yes.
And Brook was kind of like, oh yeah, ship him to LA, and I feel like the Lakers had to be like, oh no, we really wanted Brook Lopez. He's really useful, and people were like, yeah, whatever, And I mean, he only has that 1 year, and then is out the door the next year and off to Milwaukee, which is one of those really fascinating kind of sliding doors things, right? Like, if given LeBron was coming in that summer that Brook leaves, it seems like kind of a no-brainer to have Brook Lopez playing with LeBron. And I mean, if that doesn't happen, right, if the Lakers just offer him something, it's kind of crazy to think, how the Bucks' whole trajectory might have been different. Because really that, you look back on the difference between kind of the 17-18 teams and the 18-19 teams. I mean, the two big differences were Mike Budenholzer and Brook Lopez, right? And, I'd say both those guys deserve a lot of credit for the huge turnaround from Jason Kidd. And
well, let's think about this, right? You think about the big men that they had before Brook Lopez. So 4 centers that come to my mind immediately from previous iterations of teams that made the playoffs that are no longer in the league. So Tyler Zeller, Miles Plumlee, Thon Maker, and John Henson. There's 4 centers that they had on playoff teams. None of them are in the league anymore. I don't think Tyler Zeller. Maybe he was with the Spurs for a little bit. But it wasn't exactly a strong point. Let's say that.
Yeah, I'm actually curious if I think all those guys are younger than Brook Lopez too. Looking at it.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Tyler Zeller's 31, it looks like, and obviously Henson and Maker are younger than, insert joke here with Thon, but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of remarkable. It just shows you with Brook. I mean, he's just a really smart, skilled player. He's just a really unique player, and I think there is, I think, even though his floor stretching is, it's not like teams are throwing, face guarding him at the perimeter or something like that. I think teams are, okay with him shooting threes to a large extent, relative to Giannis driving and things like that. But to have a guy who can at least somewhat competently, shoot the 3 ball, be skilled offensively, and also just be such an impact defender, it's that's not those guys are not available for the minimum or something like that. You can get pretty good center talent for very little money, but I think there still is a premium paid for guys that can do what Brook does, and he certainly could have I think potentially signed for more elsewhere probably a couple of years back, but fortunately, he obviously really loved playing in Milwaukee, and just one more reason why it's so cool to see the Bucks win a championship with him. And as much as he struggled in like that first half, I mean, he had a run there in the third quarter of Game 6, right? Where he had that huge dunk and made a couple plays, and that was big. I mean, especially look back on it, like every bucket they got in that game, they really needed. Every free throw from Giannis, everything was important, and just cool to see kind of the Brook Lopez experience come full circle in that regard.
All right, let's leave it there for now.
We didn't talk about Alex Antetokounmpo being the fourth champion of the Antetokounmpo brothers. He was on the Kings team, Kings Summer League team that took home the Vegas championship tonight. So I saw he tweeted out a picture of himself with the Vegas trophy. Unfortunately, Alex did not score a point in Vegas. So maybe the Alex trajectory not looking great right now. But he'll be a pro player. Maybe not in the NBA, but he'll certainly play basketball for a long time and make money doing it, whether it's in Europe or elsewhere. But yeah, just the summer of the Antetokounmpos, man. They just keep picking up hardware.
Yeah, they were able to slow down Peyton Pritchard, which not many people have had too much luck with over the course of the summer so far. But hey, the Bucks will be dealing with Pritchard on Christmas Day, so that'll be fun to watch for sure. We've got heaps more questions to get through over the next few days and rolling into the next week. So we will get to yours, and you can continue to send them through as well. But we'll leave it there now for Frank and myself. We'll catch you guys tomorrow.
Quarterback questions continue into NFL preseason week 2. Here's what our local experts are locked on today. 49ers rookie quarterback Trey Lance shined in his second preseason game, throwing 2 touchdowns in his final 3 series. Is Lance inching closer to taking the starting job from Jimmy Garoppolo? Listen to the Locked On 49ers podcast today to find out. Pass rusher Everson Griffin is expected to sign with the Minnesota Vikings. On the Locked On Vikings podcast, our local expert Luke Braun says the vaunted Vikings defense is back. Today on Locked On Today, host Peter Bukowski continues his look around the NFL. Listen for previews of the Cowboys, the Vikings, plus what are the chances Deshaun Watson plays for the Houston Texans? Local experts on the biggest stories. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.